Hello, this is novaTopFlex. In this video, I will be demonstrating two commands that are in the /sbin directory or the /user usr/sbin directory, depending on your system configuration. I am on Ubuntu 24.04.2 LTS, so these two commands are in /sbin, but it is symbolic linked to /user/sbin. The first command that you had just seen me perform was hwclock, hwclock, which definitely requires sudo because it requires access to the system hardware clock. Now you are seeing me perform the hwinfo command, which in theory does not require sudo. Hardware info command does not require sudo, but hardware clock does require sudo. Usually sbin commands are the low-level commands, not necessarily just fairly low-level, but they are the low-level commands that usually sbin indicates that sudo is required. These are low-level or system administration commands, hardware clock, hardware info. I am using sudo for hardware info because it is a convention to use sudo when something is in the sbin, even though there are sbin commands that can theoretically function without sudo. If you've watched my ls command prefix video before, you will also be familiar with lshw, which is a command to list hardware. Although hwinfo serves a similar purpose, fairly similar at least to lshw, hwinfo, the hardware info command, is in sbin, but the list hardware command lshw is actually in just regular bin. Like bin and sbin are correlated to user bin and user sbin, on some systems, bin and sbin may be unrelated. But this is Ubuntu again, so bin is symlinked to user bin and sbin is symlinked to user sbin. So if you continue watching, you'll see more hardware information. You can expect to see even more hardware info on this command than you would doing just sudo lshw. However, the ironic thing is that lshw will warn you if you do not use sudo that some information may be inaccurate without sudo. You're not warned if you do not use sudo on the hwinfo. Kind of a weird thing, kind of an oddity with using commands in sbin that do not require root. It's that they may not all sbin commands are created equal, nor are all bin commands created equal. But sbin usually corresponds to system administration, which is exactly why there is such a difference. If you haven't already identified where I am located on my Linux system, I am actually in a TTY, so I have no graphical interface at all. And I have actually adjusted my settings, so it should be easier to watch this video. I've set the frame rate to 32 frames per second, the same as my frame buffer per sudo fbset. My previous videos were set to 24 because I did not actually know what my actual frame rate was supposed to be, but 32 is a typical frame rate for a frame buffer session on Linux. I usually record on TTY 12, but in this video specifically, like with many of my videos, I am on either TTY 1, which is this video, or on some videos I may use TTY 2, TTY 3, and so on and so forth as well. But as always, with very few exceptions as of so far, well, not sure about always, but my recent videos have been recorded with FFmpeg on TTY 12. If you continue watching the hardware information, you can expect to see additional system information and specifications about different pieces of the system hardware of the host system. Please note that your system hardware is almost certainly bound to be different from my system hardware, so your mileage may vary, your results may vary. It may tell you that you have a processor that doesn't match mine if it doesn't match mine. If you have a similar system to my system, you may get similar results, though again, I cannot guarantee that you'll have the exact same anything. You could even have similar systems and have more or fewer features available and still have more or fewer lines available in hwinfo. Again, it's not just hwinfo, but lshw and other hardware-related commands. Also, If you're wondering if I'm anywhere close to the finish line reading all this, I am not, actually. This video has a command with so much material that had to pipe the list hardware, the hardware info command, rather, to the less pager. So if you want to follow along with this command from earlier, it's sudo hwinfo, pipe is the vertical line key, shift \, or if you're from a Windows-based system, you might say /, shift / in that case, if you're coming from NT. But in the Unix-based systems, / is below the question mark and is what happens without shift. So pipe, as I'd already mentioned, and then less. Less is the name of the pager. Although, depending on the specific command, you may also want to use more as your pager instead of less. The interface should be fairly similar, but less will allow you to go backwards. More is supposed to allow you to go backwards as well, but in most actual setups, more does not support backwards searching, only forwards. And once you're at the end of file in the more pipe, or when you're paged to more, at the end of file, you cannot go back. You're dropped back to your regular command prompt. Because this is less, I can go forward and backward as much as I want, as much as you want, and I could even change the settings of less from within less itself. My initial plan for some videos is actually to add the row numbers. As you can tell, this is just a regular less interface, and I have not changed any settings, including line numbers, which I had just referred to as row numbers, by the way. We are continuing to look at the not LSHW. I keep mistaking those two. It might look like listing hardware, but hardware info and list commands, while list and info may be related names, this is actually the hwinfo command. It's weird to think that this would be the command in sbin if it does not require sudo. Again, not all sbin commands are created equal, but still. /devices /virtual, and it looks like so far we're mostly in alphabetical order, though the alphabetical order may be broken depending on the specific context specifically within this system. Most of the rest of this command that I have to continue paging through will give us information about my hardware devices in /devices /virtual. If you have any external storage devices or any external devices of any kind connected, honestly, you may have different mileage as well with LSHW or with hwinfo. Maybe then you will be able to understand the difference between the LSHW and hwinfo commands if you don't already. Now, you'll see that I've gotten to a totally different environment, or at least it might look like a totally different environment, but this is still the output of the same command. Sometimes the output might make it look like you're running multiple commands strung together as opposed to a singular cohesive command. This is really the difference between cohesion and adhesion, by the way, and adhesive Linux commands also exist. There are many different commands that perform commands within them. hwinfo might as well just seem like it's one of them, even if it's not always obvious at first. But all different types of devices accessed on the system are available with hw hardware info. So yes, again, as I had mentioned at the beginning, I have actually executed the hwinfo command with sudo privileges, as this is an sbin command. Even though sudo is not required for this specific sbin command, it is still the etiquette when you're using Linux to do sudo with all sbin commands, regardless of whether you can run them without sudo. If you have made it this far into the video stream, then please like, share, comment, subscribe, hack the YouTube algorithm if you like this type of content and would like to learn more about different Linux command line and other Linux related topics, documentation, content, and context. Until next time, thanks for watching and signing off.